Just one question. What if you miss?
I won't.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is? Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. That is crazy.
Whether you play a lot or a little, most likely at some point in your life you've played a video game. We live in such a technological era that it's almost impossible to avoid the fact that they exist, especially with the advent of modern cell phones and other handheld devices that allow you to play games whenever and wherever you feel like it. At this point in time, gaming exists all around us, whether it be through consoles, PCs, or other mobile devices. There are millions and millions of people in the world gaming. But not you. You're in class, watching a poorly made video on a topic that you probably haven't thought much about recently. It goes without saying that in 2014, the gaming industry is a titan in the global economy, generating over $10.5 billion in the 2009 fiscal year. Logic will tell you that this number has been steadily increasing since, and that gaming's popularity has increased significantly due to the advances in technology, game design, and brilliant and creative ideas from game developers around the world. However, even in this day and age, there are several people who claim that video games can never be considered as a true art form. Let me start by addressing the definition of art according to Webster. Art, something that is created with imagination and skill and is beautiful or expresses important ideas or feelings. Based off of that description alone, I could give you well over 20 or 30 games that I consider being important or aesthetically pleasing to look at. Remember this guy? Was that not an expression of emotion or an important idea? Is the crafting of characters with unique personalities, feelings, and stories any less than that of those we see on television, music, film, or novels, just because they're in a video game? Much like these other forms of art, great video games can often express extremely important ideas and beliefs that can contribute to the way we see the world around us. One of my favorite examples of this comes from the video game series Metal Gear Solid, in which you play as a genetically cloned soldier codenamed Solid Snake, whose main goal is to destroy a weapon of mass destruction called Metal Gear. It's pretty basic on the surface, but if you were to play through the game, you could see that there's more to it than just kill and destroy. The game seeks to teach players that we as humans have our own fate to bear, and that we can't just sit by and let war control the way in which we view other people or nations. It should also go without saying that the game has an anti-nuclear warfare message. As technology has improved, there is more effective and subtle ways to view how the creator of the game, Hideo Kojima, represents this idea that we are all similar. Let's use this character as an example. Her name is Quiet, and she has the ability to become invisible whenever she feels like it. But pay attention to what happens when she lands on the ground. Did you catch it? If not, let me show it again and explain. Through this character's ability to become invisible, we are shown as she reappears a glimpse of her skin, muscle, and bone reforming on her body. You could see this as a way of symbolizing that regardless of who we align ourselves with in life, what we believe in, whatever our skin color, gender, or whatever nation we hail from, as humans we are all fundamentally the same on the inside, and these differences shouldn't matter. Or you could just see it as a cool effect that she shows off as her powers are revealed. Albeit the latter form of thinking is a bit superficial, what's important is that these things can be interpreted in some way that is constructive. So how could this not be considered art? To explain the main idea behind this project, I want you to understand that we are not looking at video games in terms of the gamers themselves being a minority group, but compared to music, novel, film, or any other form of artwork, that gaming is clearly not seen as such, and therefore is not allowed to contribute to world culture in a meaningful way, thus making it a minority.
You serious?
A stretch, I know, but hopefully I will have provided good evidence to back up my claims and convince you that this is true. But before I do that, I want to give you a brief history of gaming as a whole, so that way you can understand where I'm coming from. But keep up with me here, because we're going to try to get through this as quick as we can. 1955, the US military designs Hutspiel, in which red and blue players representing NATO and Soviet commanders wage war with each other. This was one of the first two-player games and was designed to study the effects of tactical nuclear weapons and air support on the defense of stabilized positions in Western Europe. To put that into easier terms, it's a battle of resources and strategy where players are meant to keep their supplies high while destroying whatever resources they can on the opposing side in order to gain the advantage. The game ends when one side cannot communicate effectively with their troops because radio support was destroyed on the opposing side, or their men are so diminished that they cannot conceivably battle in an effective way against the opposing side and will be dominated if they decide to put up a fight. Because I couldn't find footage of the game in action, I've decided that the closest comparison to this gameplay can be seen in the outfit developed by Relic Entertainment, the main difference being that in this game it's the US versus Nazi Germany. This game holds all of the same ideas as Hutspiel Constant, where the player is given a base supply of money or command points and is awarded for completing various gameplay objectives such as destroying enemy resources, outposts, vehicles, and foot soldiers. As you gain more money, you unlock better fortifications, weapons, vehicles, artillery, and even airstrikes to use against your opponent. The game ends once one player is so powerful that he or she can invade the opposing player's main base and destroy it, holding it relatively true to the original concept from 1955. In 1958, Willie Higginbottom creates a tennis game on an oscilloscope, a machine that allows the observation of varying signal voltages to create images on a two-dimensional plot where repeating electrical impulses give the optical illusion of a constant image. This game was also created on an analog computer for public demonstration at the Brooklyn National Library in 1958, and while Willie's game was largely forgotten 2 years after its creation, it gave birth to what many people consider to be the first video game, Pong. 1964, John Keremy creates the computer timeshare system and basic programming language at Dartmouth, making it easy for students to write computer games. Gaming soon starts to explode as tons of people now possess the ability to create games. 1966 through 72, Ralph Baer conceives the idea of playing video games on television. He writes down his ideas and this becomes the basis of development of video games that can be played on TV. He patents his idea for television gaming, and in 1972, Magnavox releases the Odyssey, the first home gaming console based on his designs. In the same year, Nolan Bushnell and Al Alcorn develop an arcade table tennis game known as Pong, which is such a hit that people broke the machine used to play the game by stuffing too many quarters into its slots. This is hailed by many as the first video game ever created. 1976, Don Wood's version of the game Adventure, originally created by William Crowther in 1975, is ported to the computer and plunges players into an imaginary world of caves and treasures inspired by the game Dungeons & Dragons. This game will pave the way for thousands of role-playing games such as the Elder Scrolls games and the more recent release of Activision's new blockbuster IP, Destiny. In 1977, Atari releases its video game computer system, more commonly known as the Atari 2600, which featured a tactile joystick, interchangeable cartridge games, games in color, and even switches for setting difficulty levels in games. The angry video game nerd is quoting as saying, "Everything is an event with Atari, even walking through a door." This console makes millions of Americans home video game players and also defines the terms for classic video gaming. 1985, the Nintendo Entertainment System, otherwise known as the NES, is released and revives the US gaming industry after its crash in 1983. The most noteworthy games released on the console are Mike Tyson's Punch-Out!, Metroid, the Castlevania series, Mega Man, Super Mario Bros., and The Legend of Zelda. With the NES, Nintendo introduced what is now common practice among all platforms and companies, which was the license of third-party developers who were authorized to produce and distribute titles for Nintendo's legendary platform. The NES also created the basis of peripheral gameplay with the Zapper, U-Force, and Power Glove. These would serve as the granddaddies of the famous Guitar Hero and Rock Band instruments, which are essential to the experience and atmosphere of those games. There were also around 822 titles released for the NES over its lifespan, 709 licensed and 113 unlicensed. The NES would also be rated by IGN as the greatest console in the history of video games in 2009. 1993, video games like Mortal Kombat prompt the US Senate to hold hearings on violence in video games. The controversy prompts the Senate to create a system for rating games called the Entertainment Software Ratings Board, also known as the ESRB. The system they create rates games based upon possibly controversial content including violence, sexual content, and language, and places them in categories rating from E for everyone to M for mature audiences and AO for adults only. So you may be wondering why I just gave you a minor history lesson on the origins of gaming. You would be right to do so, but the main reason I highlighted the information was to show you that much like film, gaming has evolved into something more than just high scores and explosions. It's much more to myself and other people than just something fun to look at or play with. There are tons of things that can be learned, felt, and experienced through great and thoughtful games the same way there can be in film, music, or novels. And the fact that some people, particularly a man by the name of Jonathan Jones of The Guardian, a critic for a British national newspaper company, makes claims that video games aren't art because, in his words, art is one's personal reaction to life. The worlds created by other people don't allow the player to impose their own personal vision of life in the game because the developer has already created a character that has his or her own personal vision of what life is. To Mr. Jones, anything that happens in a game was programmed to unfold in that way, and therefore any reactions had by the player are dismissible because the creator of the game has taken the responsibility of predetermining their worldview. My counterclaim to this argument would come in the form of Telltale Games' iteration of The Walking Dead, in which all players eventually do come to relatively the same conclusion at the end of a chapter, but the way in which they achieve that ending is based upon how they want to interact with the people in the world to progress towards that ending. While these choices they make are predetermined, most of them accurately convey many different personality types, and often the result of this is that the game can differ from person to person based upon how the player chooses to respond to different situations. Here is an example of a choice that the player is allowed to make when placed in a certain situation.
You're hurt.
Oh God.
I said stay away.
We need to get you help.
It's too late for that.
Guys, she's been bitten.
What?
I told you, I said go away. I'm bit. But you wouldn't just leave.
Let's calm down. You could be fine.
I won't be fine. My boyfriend was bitten. You get sick and you die and you come back and you kill anything you can find.
You have a boyfriend?
Glenn?
I don't want that. It's not Christian. Please, just leave me. Please go.
Come with us, and we'll find you some help.
You have a gun.
So,
Can I borrow it?
what do you mean borrow?
Give it to me. I can just, end this, and then there's no problem.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Please, I don't want to be one of them. They're satanic.
We can't let you do that to yourself.
Then do it for me.
We need to get going.
Give it to me, please.
This is crazy.
Please, step back.
It's just 2 seconds, just one bullet, and I can be with my family, and it'll all be fine.
Miss.
Back up, please.
Whoa, take it easy. We just want to help.
You can't.
Miss, just relax now. You need to think this through. We'll find you a doctor. It'll be okay. Let's all just...
Heavy stuff, I know, but what occurs as a result is that if the player's personal choice turns out to hurt them later on, they made that decision on their own, and it was probably based on their own personal values, personality, and reaction to said situation. Thus, his argument is invalidated because the player in this game is at least allowed to have what they consider to be their own personal reaction to the game, and in fact, their personal reaction and choices set up future interactions within that storyline. What's important and even scary about Mr. Jones is that he may have a lot of influence on the thoughts of many readers who enjoy his work, and the fact that he chooses not to look at gaming in a meaningful way just because he's not into it is a perpetuation of the idea that it's okay to dismiss what you don't understand. Just to put it into perspective, this ideology has led to the distasteful treatment of millions of people in the world, from the burning of witches in the Middle Ages to the mistreatment of mentally ill in psychiatric hospitals and even the Holocaust in World War II. What's common in this pattern of thinking is that instead of trying to figure out what was wrong with the situation and trying to fix it, it was easier to brush it off and not think about how wrong it actually was. What makes Mr. Jones and those that think like him ignorant are the fact that video games nowadays speak to people, particularly a younger audience, in a way that's more powerful than books, television, and movies. To quote Keith Stewart, another writer from The Guardian, "The greatest artists you see want to communicate in the most popular media of the time. They want to be heard. That's why Shakespeare wrote for the lice-ridden but packed theaters of London. That's why Bertolt Brecht collaborated with Fritz Lang to bring his theories to Hollywood. That's why Dickens and Dumas had their novels serialized into magazines. Why aren't games just fun? Because video games are now a language, and language is a tool of expression and change. A bit like art, yes?"
It reminds me of when people used to say that comic books weren't high art, and that they were nothing but childish nonsense. I'll admit, I used to kind of be on that boat too. But then groundbreaking works like Mouse came out, and Watchmen, and Persepolis, and a lot of other great works that said, hey, we don't care what you think. We're going to prove that there is a medium here that can be as powerful, thoughtful, provoking, and emotionally stimulating as any other great work of art. And sure enough, the medium is much more respected now than it was before. An argument has even risen that comic book heroes are the new Greek myths, being written from so many different points of view but still being the center of value that popular culture looks up to. Perhaps the reimagining of video game characters with their legends and quests could be working its way up to the same page. So, in answer to are video games art or high art, I would make the argument that if people don't see that the answer is yes, they will. If a game doesn't exist that'll sway you over, the possibilities that continue to evolve with technology inevitably have to. And yes, many great people I admire like Roger Ebert declared they never have been and never will be art. And while I respectfully disagree, I don't see him or anyone who thinks similar any less intelligent or influential. I simply ask that people who think it cannot evolve at the very least keep their minds open to the roads that can be traveled with the medium. That if you think video games are not high art now, be aware that they certainly have the ability to be so in the future. Many evolving artists and mediums have been shunned in the past, and much of their progress came from not what they weren't, but what they could be. And it's hard to see how the evolution of this to this is any different from the evolution of this to this. Yes, there will always be mindless games for escapism in the same way there will always be mindless movies for escapism. But if that is the full extent of the possibilities you can see in video games, I humbly challenge you to stop, start over, and play again.